Hello and welcome back to Scottish Independence Podcasts. This week we have another bonus episode coming from the Rising Clyde Climate Justice Show. Host Iain Bruce has shared with us his discussion with a couple of activists who are exploring the link between fossil fuels and the rise of the far right and what the activists might do about that.
Hello and welcome to Rising Clyde, the Scottish Climate Justice Show. I'm Iain Bruce, and today we're talking about Climate Camp Scotland. That's the biggest and most important gathering of the climate justice movement in the country. And this year, there are going to be some changes. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, rather different protests that happened in Glasgow last month.
1, 2, 3, 4. Seapeak funds Russia's war. 5, 6, 7, 8. Russia is a terrorist state. 1, 2, 3, 4. Seapeak funds Russia's war. 5, 6, 7, 8. Russia is a terrorist state.
I think we also drafted a letter to give to Seapeak employees, which might not be here today, but we might read that out later. I'll just pass it on to the next speaker. Thank you, Graham.
I'm Wook. I'm from Climate Camp Scotland. I'm here to send solidarity to you, to all Ukrainians from the climate and environmental justice movement. And I'm going to keep this short. We have woken up in a new day and age. We have woken up in an era where fossil fuel companies and far-right authoritarians and fascists are working hand in hand to destroy communities, to wreck the climate, to murder innocent people. And in this case, Seapeak is one of the companies that enables all this. And yeah, we're surrounded by fossil fascists. That is the new reality we are facing. We're witnessing in real time how the US is sliding further and further into the same direction, where we witness Donald Trump targeting indigenous communities as well, evicting the Sioux people from Standing Rock to build his pipelines again. That is what we're up against.
No oil for blood!
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 Don't have terrorists!
Don't let terrorists!
Stop killing children with your money!
Stop killing children with your money!
I think what this conflict in this point in time in history shows is that we can win, but we will win only if we fight together. And this is a fight against colonialism in its 21st century form, which is very evidently displayed by Putin's actions and agenda, but also by Trump's actions and agenda.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Seapeak funds Russia's war.
5, 6, 7, 8.
Russia is a terrorist state.
The path that Seapeak is driving through the Arctic Sea is the path of our collective destruction. LNG should not be allowed to expand, and not just from Russia, but also from the States. This is a moment where we need to wake up to the reality of what is behind the fossil fuel trade, what it funds, what it enables, but also the kind of world that it locks us into. And this is not the world in which Ukrainians are fighting for and dying for.
Seapeak isn't just facilitating energy trade. It is fueling destruction of homes, of lives, and of our climate. And don't be fooled. The executives know exactly what they are doing. Yay! We are here to say, not in our city! Not in our city! Not in our day! Not in our day!
So that was the protest outside Seapeak last month. A little bit later, we might come back to that video to see whether it does or doesn't have any relevance to what we're actually going to be talking about today, which is, as I said, Climate Camp Scotland, the most important gathering of the climate justice movement in Scotland. And to talk about this year's Climate Camp, we're very pleased to have with us Ash and Quan, two of the people who are organizing this year's event. Thanks so much to both of you for joining us. Ash, maybe I could start with you, because I understand there are some changes. What exactly is going to happen this year?
So this year, Climate Camp Scotland's being held from the 22nd to the 29th of July. We're going to be in a location in the Central Belt which hasn't been announced yet. And this year our camp focus is climate and the far right. So our sort of main focus is trying to connect communities who are already fighting fascism and bring together climate activists, like anti-fascist organisers, trans and queer organisers and activists, Palestine organisers, land justice and Indigenous communities, and really have sort of like a meeting point to come together, organise, and learn together and build a more resilient movement. So we're focusing on the climate and the far right this year, and we're like talking about how to target fossil fuel companies that are helping to sustain these far right regimes, and preparing to defend marginalized groups which like under increasing oppression with the rise of the far right, and also learn how to defend social movements and resist increased like police and state repression. And as per usual with Climate Camp, there'll be workshops, there will be amazing food, there'll be ceilidhs, and yeah, we really want this to like be a space to bring together lots of these communities who are already doing really important anti-fascist organizing, and strategize and learn together about how we do resist the rise of the far right.
So for people who haven't been to a climate camp before, just tell us a bit more about the the food and the ceilidhs and the politics, of course. What exactly will be going on during those days.
So day one of climate camp will be setting up the camp. So lots of like getting involved, putting tents up, helping to put up our compost toilets, getting the kitchen prepped. We have an amazing kitchen collective, Skiffer, who will be cooking us 3 meals a day. So everyone can get involved in cooking, washing up, whatever takes your fancy, really. And during the day, there's a program of workshops. There's also assemblies in the morning and the evening. We normally have one assembly, which is like a more sort of international scope. So talking about other campaigns that are going on around the world, people and campaigns that we're showing solidarity with and learning about. We'll have assembly potentially about issues more local to where the camp itself is held. And in the evenings, we will have a whole range of ceilidhs. We've had climate cabaret. So it's sort of time to learn and attend workshops and like get new skills, practice things, but also to just be together and like spend time together sort of as a movement and have fun as well.
So are you expecting a lot of new people along?
Yeah, we're really hoping to have new people along. This year's camp is like a really important opportunity to invite new people along. Our theme this year is such a sort of broad focus in a way, which is a little bit of a divergence from potentially how camps run in the past. So last year we were in Aberdeen and we had a focus like quite specifically on the St. Fittick's Park campaign, for example. So we were like camping on land that was threatened by industrial development in St. Fittick's Park. And this year, instead of focusing on something really local to where the camp itself is held, we are taking on this almost insanely broad theme of climate and the far right, but like really trying to show how it is like really concretely manifested like in Scotland and in the UK, and how it's like fossil fuel companies that are based in Scotland that are also financing and propping up these far right regimes. So yeah, we want every new person along, whether that's people already involved in the climate movement or broader anti-fascist organising, or somebody who's never sort of been in a movement space. Like this is really the year to have everyone around.
Locate this a bit for me in the sort of recent history of climate camp, because it does sound like it's a bit of a new departure.
Yeah, it's funny to think that we now already have a history, because in my mind we're still just like but yeah, I think Climate Camp Scotland has a tradition that links up with the broader European climate movement of using protest camps as sites to train for direct action against a specific target. So the most famous one, like being Ende Gelände, set up to like target coal mines with blockades and occupations and so on. And in Climate Camp Scotland, this camp will still do that. Like we will host trainings for direct action. We will prepare people with like, how do you move in a group, in a massive collective? How do you challenge fossil fuel infrastructure directly with your bodies? How do you shut sites of fossil fuel extraction down? What sort of rights do you need to know? But this year, we also want to take a broader look, right? Like, I think not only the climate movement, but the entire European left has woken up to a whole new context. At the latest, since Trump's re-election, that we are now surrounded by fascist movements, and they are all wedded to this new, they're either climate denialist, or worse, they see climate change as an opportunity for more extractivism. So like, oh, like climate change is going to melt Greenland, let's seize it for more oil and gas extraction and stuff like that. And these sort of things demand our attention in a different way. There's so much stuff going on right now, and all these fascist regimes, what they throw out is just so like mind-boggling all the time, and no one knows how to react to that. But what we can't forget is that climate change is getting worse and worse every year, and the far right is inherently wedded to driving climate change further and profiteering from it to finance their regimes. And that's why we chose to like have this as a special focus for this year, not attached to like a specific local site like Grangemouth or Aberdeen or Mossmoran and Fife, but to like have a broader look at which fossil fuel companies in Scotland serve far-right regimes. And one of them is, as you mentioned in the video that we've seen, is Seapeak, that finances Russian fascism and Russian fascist expansion into Ukraine directly via gas sales. We have also Ineos that has just fired hundreds of workers, shut down their refinery, and is bringing in frack gas from the US, from vulnerable communities, often indigenous communities in the US, and Scotland hangs in there. We have Ithaca, a Scottish company that's partly Israeli owned, that finances operations in the West Bank, has fueled IDF military vehicles in the past. So these sort of things need to be challenged here in Scotland on a broader basis. And we also need to bring the broader left and climate actors together to think about, we're in the shits. What do we do?
I want to understand more about that political context, but just in terms of the actual activity of the camp, I mean, Climate Camp has always had a central focus, as you mentioned, on direct action and so forth. And you say that's still going to be a part of it, but it sounds like it's going to be a bit more arm's length, a bit more sort of. It's not actually about doing direct action. Is that a important change in tactics or not?
No, there's no change in tactics. So maybe two things. The first goal of Climate Camp is always to like build a movement space, to be like a prefiguratively living together, to like say, okay, right, everything needs to change, our entire system needs to change. But until that happens, we need to learn how that would work. We need to envision and imagine it in practice together. So that sort of thing is like just as important as taking direct action, to like just live together, as Ash has said, live together, sing together, learn together, strategize together. These sort of things, the collective living experience of a climate camp is just as important as direct action, because why we do direct action is we want to imagine how we would act as if we were already free. And we want to directly use our bodies to challenge injustices. That's what direct action is for, in the broader climate tradition, but also generally in the wider civil disobedience tradition. And that is still going to be part of Climate Camp. It might look different because we're not occupying and locating ourselves on a site of injustice directly, but people can expect some direct action to come out of this camp. I can't comment more at this time.
No, I understand. I'm just trying to think of whether the people involved, this focus on the far right, for very obvious reasons, does that mean, will there be really different groups of people involved coming from slightly different backgrounds, maybe thinking slightly differently about tactics to the way Climate Camp has done things before, or not? Do you think that isn't going to change?
I think that was always the case. Like we always had like activists from different parts of the movement. Like we always had like people from Extinction Rebellion, from Just Stop Oil, from other European countries coming over, from different sections of the movement, from like Palestine protesters, trans right activists coming in. So these people are like always coming and sharing their own struggles and their own tactics. Like we hosted, like, for example, like Leonidas Issa from Ecuador. We hosted like Ukrainian anarchists, and all their tactics look different, right? But we want to create Climate Camp as a space where we share tactics, both nationally and internationally, and develop these further, and have a think on what works, what doesn't work, like which group is best positioned to use this tactic or that tactic. And yeah, that is what Climate Camp's for. And if the collective decides, okay, this year we need to change our tactics in this way, yeah, let's try it out. Because, I don't know, the fascists are winning, and we need to...
Yeah. I mean, Ash, how do you think this new focus on the far right, I mean, apart from the obvious situation that we're in that drives this, is this something that the broader climate movement, do you think, has woken up to and is taking account of, or is Climate Camp Scotland sort of leading the way a bit here?
I think it's something that sort of like inherently influences the way that everybody organizes. Like one of the things that we're talking about when we talk about increasing far right governments, like our own governments, like moving further right, one of the things that like comes along with that we've seen is like increased police repression, like increasing crackdown on protests, like new legislation introduced to like even further criminalize climate protest. Like we're seeing activists who've had prison sentences like that we've never seen before. So I think the way that we organize is sort of always tied to the context that we're in, and in that way, like yes, definitely the far right is an issue which is like on everybody's minds, like in this way. And I think in terms of sort of tactics, like Climate Camp Scotland has always used tactics that aim to protect activists like from police repression, from the criminal justice system, like using mass direct action, protecting our identities, and like trying to take care of each other in that way. Like we're not a group that's ever sort of aimed for arrest, and we recognize that as like the criminal justice system and the police is something that does active harm to people. So I think in that sense, like the increase of the far right and the increased police repression doesn't necessarily like change our tactics in that way, because that's something we've sort of always recognized as a risk and try to organize around. And I think, yeah, in more general terms, like one of the things that we want to do this year is like try and really highlight that link between climate and the far right, that this isn't just about the rise of the far right, but the way in which climate is sort of like intertwined in that. And it's not kind of, yeah, I mean, so it is not a coincidence that it's like far right regimes and like Reform, for example, want to abandon all our climate policies. Like, we had Richard Tice, who's Reform's deputy leader, say that the evidence for man-made climate change is garbage and things like this. And it's not like just a coincidence that happens to be their policy, because they are funded by oil and gas interests. Like I think between December and June 2019 to 2024, like 92% of Reform's donations came from oil and gas interests, like polluting companies and just outright climate deniers. So I don't think that it's an issue that anyone's blind to, like at all, but it is like, as we were talking about previously, so much sort of overwhelming and mind-boggling stuff comes out of these far right groups, and this ideology that it is sort of overwhelming, and it is this kind of constant saturation of things happening in the news all the time. That is like the sort of classic playbook of how to disempower people, because you are so overwhelmed that it seems like there's a million different issues to focus on. And I think one of the reasons for choosing climate in the far right this year is that, like, as the climate movement, this is an opportunity as well for us not to just kind of focus on this, but also to be quite strategic in how we're aligning what we're targeting, right? Because the same targets are the same fossil fuel companies are the ones who are financing far right regimes, who are financing land grabs, who are making people's lives materially worse, not just here but across the entire world. And so when we are in this sort of state of overwhelmed saturation of bad news, it makes a lot of strategic sense for us as a climate movement and other movements like anti-fascist organizers and trans rights organizers to try and get to the root causes here in these companies and these targets which are financing everything and which sort of tie this sort of stuff together. So I think it's something that we all organize with that in mind, but this is an opportunity to sort of make that explicit and mean that we're sharing our resources and sharing our time and really choosing targets that have the maximum effect.
I'm just wondering, concretely, are there anti-fascist movements, trans rights organizations and so forth that are already kind of on board and sharing this the organizing process with you? Or is that something you're kind of trying to move towards?
I think there is lots of organizations that are thinking about the same questions as we do. But I think there's a lot of disorientation in lots of movements right now. As the trans rights movement, for example, is just they're being battered and battered with one thing after the next, and they have mobilizations, they have demos, but they're losing the fight in lots of different ways, right? And the same can be said about lots of other things, the anti-fascist movement is not stopping reform surge in England right now, and there's lots of people having the same conversation. And I think the same is true for the wider climate movement. Lots of people see this sort of rise in climate denialism, this rise of acceptance of fossil fuel, the walk back on climate targets, the sort of disdain and disgust that lots of people see climatey and greeny things. And I think what we're trying to do is to get all this together in a room and say, okay, what should we do about it? And I think maybe to add to that is we also want everyone to gather and just have a nice time and just be together for a while, because right now everyone is so exhausted and so disoriented from everything that we want everyone to just have a gathering space where everyone is maybe not completely aligned, but roughly focusing in the same direction, so that we can figure this out together and build a space that is ours and build a strategy that links different things together, but also to popularize direct action as a method of action that other movements might not use as much. Obviously anti-fascist movements use direct action arguably sometimes more than the climate movement and more successfully, but others might not. The trans movement might not have used it in the same way, on the same extent. And these sort of conversations need to happen in a space that is built on solidarity, is built on living together, and is just a space where we can all just sit down for a bit and take a breather. And that is what Climate Camp needs to be for. Yeah, I don't know whether you have things to add to that, Ash, but
it seems to me that this kind of combination that you're looking at is at least, at the very least, a really, really interesting way of trying to put your finger on the different elements, the different bits of the very difficult situation we're in at the moment. I mean, it's obviously not a finished kind of project for kind of confronting that, but I suppose what my my question is what's happening? How does this fit into the rest of the climate justice movement? I mean, you mentioned people being disoriented before. I mean, there certainly seems to be a lot of flux at the moment. XR seem to have completely changed their project, their tactics. Just Oil did some similar stuff. The Climate Justice Coalition that came out of the COP26 stuff is I'm not really, I mean, I know they're targeting to, the COP30 in Berlin now, in the road to Berlin. I'm just wondering how all this is pulling together, or isn't it pulling together,
I mean, I think it sort of pulls together in the sense of like, yeah, as you said, this is sort of a moment where there's multiple different parts of the climate movement are either taking some sort of step back or doing some sort of like reevaluation, like of essentially the thing that we're all feeling at the moment, which is like we're not winning and what's going wrong. And I think the way that Climate Camp fits into this broader movement is like exactly the sort of point of come and like live together and have these conversations, and have this conversation not just in your own group of kind of, where do we go from here and what tactics should we be using and how do we protect our activists and all of these sorts of questions, but to have that like dialogue between lots of different parts of the climate movement and externally from the climate movement as well. And I think that the way that Climate Camp can't offer all of the answers, but it can offer a space in which people can come together to talk about this stuff, and also, like really importantly, also just have a small bit of a nice time. Try and have some sort of like rest, or at least sort of like shared experience of how life can be different and living together in this different way. And just sort of have these conversations like together. I think that's sort of Climate Camp's main kind of like advantage, is that we just can bring people together in this way on quite a big scale.
No, I mean, I think even achieving that would be a major achievement, but look, I think we're probably running out of time. I think it would be really interesting maybe on another occasion to talk a bit more specifically about the far right and climate, how those two things go together. We probably haven't really got time to go into that properly now. Maybe just one thing, Wung, since you were at that Seapeak protest, just give me a quick summary of what the connection is there. Why is that kind of thing important for the climate movement?
I think it's because the target of that protest was a site of fossil fascism. It is a company that ships fossil fuels extract from indigenous land in Russia, financing a fascist expansion war. And I think lots of people on the left are still like a bit like have not woken up yet to the new realities that we're faced, right? Like we've spent so much time trying to move the climate movement towards an anti-capitalist direction, and that's correct, right? That's the right thing to do. We need to like figure out how capitalism fundamentally drives things, but the sort of neoliberal era that we've sort of all like been radicalized in is moving rapidly towards a far-right authoritarian fascist outlook, and there are certain systems that sustain the move towards fascism, and that is the fossil fuel industry. Like that is Trump's drill baby drill, that it's Nigel Farage's drill baby drill, it is Putin's gas extraction and gas sales in his shadow fleet. It is like from it, and it goes further than that. It goes to Modi, it goes to Netanyahu, it goes to the Iranian regime. All these far-right authoritarian regimes sustain themselves through fossil fuel extraction that burns our planet down and threatens to move us further and further towards a new era of fascism. And every climate activist needs to be aware of that and needs to resist that with everything we have. And obviously, like the climate movement is not what it is when it was like at its height in 2020, 2019, but we need to rebuild and we need to fight back. And that needs to start now. And why not at Climate Camp? Why not come to Climate Camp, learn how to take direct action, find your people, form a collective, and do whatever you can to stop this march towards fossil fascism.
That sounds like a really strong note to end on. Thank you very much, Wung. And as I say, maybe we can explore some of these connections a bit further, maybe even before Climate Camp too, to sort of develop that conversation a bit further. But thank you very, very much indeed to both of you, to Ash and to Wung from Climate Camp Scotland. That's all we've got time for this time on Rising Clyde. Until next time, thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Hope you enjoyed that. Don't forget to subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening on YouTube, you can click the little bell and you get a reminder whenever we put out a new episode, which is every Friday.
And sign up for our mailing list. You can do that from the website. And we always send one out at the beginning of each month to tell you what's happening. Last but not least, you can buy us a coffee on coffee.com.
And we'll catch you later. Bye now.